Hello YouTube, this is Bruno. I'm about to create the third parameter on my survival server. So this video will be on how to run a world eater and create a parameter. Now, in case you're wondering, it's not a compulsive addiction to parameter creation, although I admit worlds are tasty. But I already did one parameter here, which is my main parameter where I have farms like my creeper farm and my slime farm. I did a second parameter because we have some crazy guy on the server who created his own version of Decked Out. Mind you, not a copy of Tango's game, but a completely unique level design. And since we needed a lot of space and dig deep down, we just decided to do a parameter for that. And the third parameter that I'm about to create will be in this huge river biome, because I want to build a mega drowned farm or a mega copper farm. So anyway, when creating these parameters, I learned a few things the hard way and wanted to share. Now, I'm not an expert on Slimestone and World Eaters, so please check the description for updates, notes and possibly corrections. I'd also strongly recommend to watch Pixel's video on how to create a World Eater. This is a very good summary, but I think there are a few things that this video doesn't cover. First of all, creating a parameter might be easier than you think. At least if your server allows TNT tubers, of course. It depends on the size, but I'd say for a 300 by 300 parameter you'll have to work perhaps 30 to 40 hours. A lot of this goes into babysitting your trenchers, and we'll get to that. For the materials you'll need about 2 shulkers of slime blocks and about half a shulker each of observers, pistons, sticky pistons and redstone blocks, of course depending on the design you choose. But that's not too bad. If you have a swamp slime farm and a witch farm, then you can easily produce the amount of these components. And on the plus side, you'll probably make enough diamonds that you can fuel any shopping addiction on your server for years. And once you have a parameter, it's easy to build very fast specialized farms. A gunpowder farm that creates 50 shulkers of gunpowders per hour, no problem. Okay, let's talk about the preliminaries. Number 1, use Litematica. I know that some of you don't like to use Litematica, and it does require a fabric modded client, even though it will run with any vanilla server. And to be honest, I don't believe that you can build something like this without Litematica. Well, maybe you can, but I certainly can't. If you do something like an item sorter, you can probably wing it. And if you make a mistake, like this, the worst thing that can happen is that you may have to reset all the filters. But complex flying machines, especially with TNT dupers, are very different creatures. Make one mistake, place one block wrong, and many hours of your work is down the drain. Even if you make only one mistake out of, say, every 10,000 blocks, this one mistake will break your machine more likely than not. But this is where Litematica kicks in. I in fact make a ton of mistakes, and Litematica is the safety net that finds all of them. You will only need a fraction of the functionality, so don't be afraid of the complexity. So one thing that is super helpful to use the render layers up or down, or you can also render single layers. So you can build from the bottom up to the top, like you do in survival. Another super helpful thing is just to use the pick block ability, which will work in survival if you have the block in the inventory, just using the middle mouse button. But the game changer are 2 other functions. Of course, Litematica will show you if you place the block wrong. So if you look at the block that is wrong on the top right, and I made the font really large so that you can see it, Litematica will show you that you have the wrong block, in this case a piston instead of a sticky piston. But the real kicker is the schematic verifier that will show you everything that is wrong and is able to highlight it. And you will see that even if you are far away. And the second game changer, and for this we jump a bit to the future, is the ability to test out builds. So here I have already created the first trench, and now I'm about to run the second trencher, and for reasons that we'll get into later, I want to know if this is safe. So what I just do is I create a Litematica copy of this world. This is my survival server. I'm not going to creatify anything. I just select the area that I want to copy over. So there you see the selection box. I save it to some temporary file, and then I go to a creative super flat world, and then I can paste in the schematic like so. And now I can start the contraption in case of this trenchers by clicking this fence gate. I can tick sprint. And if I make any mistake, I will see that the contraption does not work. And that's super helpful because it will find any mistakes that you did. And you can simulate the next like 10 hours or something if you want. And just check that everything is fine. So use Litematica, period. Okay, you have chosen to make a parameter. You know the rough location. The question is, how large do you want it to be? And the smallest sensible size you can do is a radius of 128 blocks, because if you stand smack down in the middle of the perimeter and you do your spawning sphere, you want this spawning sphere to be completely inside the perimeter. So the minimum size is 256 by 256. Of course, if you make this perimeter a bit larger, then you can build several farms on the ground with dedicated AFK spots. In my main perimeter, I have a creeper farm, a slime farm, and a squid farm. And I had no problem finding AFK spots for those. But the flip side is not only the effort, actually it isn't that much overhead to do a larger perimeter, but the limiting factor is the simulation distance. Most of you know this, but the world runs only in the vicinity of the player. On a Java server the default distance is 10 chunks. And flying machines will break if you unload them, especially the more complex ones. So the way to run a World Eater is to have a player here in the middle, probably above the World Eater. And this will usually be a second account or buddy. So the player here stays and loads the whole World Eater. Let's see what happens if we don't. So this is Euler's World Eater. The simulation distance in this test world is 10, which is the same as our server. And of course the World Eater is significantly larger. So let's start it. And you see that only part of the machines start, of course. And if we move, part of the machines might get stuck. And if we are very, very lucky, the machine might still work. But if we are unlucky, the whole thing might be beyond repair. Do not unload World Eaters partially while they are running. Do not unload them whole. Always have a player in the middle. And of course, this reduces the size of the World Eater to what we can do with one player. This is the MCA selector tool. And let's say this chunk is our middle. Then we can go 10 chunks in each direction. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And this 21 by 21 chunk area, or 336 by 336, is the most that a single player can load. So if we want to make our perimeter any larger, then we need a second, third, or fourth player to load the area. In single player, you can always increase the simulation distance. But on a server, if you do your first perimeter, I would recommend stick to that area, 21 by 21 chunks, or maybe even a bit smaller. And now we come to a step that can save or generate hours of work. And this is choosing the location of the perimeter. Not because real estate prices may go up or down, but because one of the main works is to clear water while trenching. And a perimeter like this will create tons of work because you have a river alongside the border of the perimeter. So creating this trench will require you to remove a lot of water. This will take an eternity. And on the other side, you even have an ocean. So at the very least, you want the corners to be in dry areas. Something like that would be much better because we have the minimum amount of water in the trenches and we have dry land at the corners. So use the tool of your choice, make a creative copy of your world and find a place that has as little water as possible within the trench area. So now you have chosen the location and the size. Now is the time to choose the World Eater design. So I recommend to head to the Slimestone Discord and check out the archives for World Eaters and trenchers. Now let's get something out of the way. Some creators recommend just using a TNT flying machine zigzagging around the world to create a perimeter, basically without sweepers. And you absolutely don't want to do that, because clearing all the water and lava would be a nightmare. It's bad enough having to do that for the trenches. In fact, I'd estimate that trenching takes up about 60% of the total work time that you need for a perimeter, not counting AFK time. So you want a real World Eater design that uses sweepers at the bottom to clear out the liquids. And the consideration for your choice are on one side the trench size. Of course, the smaller the trenches, the less work you have for the trenching. So I decided to go this time with Euler's World Eater. This is a small trench World Eater. I think the side trenches only have to be 1 block. And the main trenches have to be 10 blocks or something. So the smaller the trenches, the less work you have. And the other consideration is build complexity. So in survival, you want to build this from the bottom up. And building these flying machines is always a bit iffy. So you want to avoid updating any observers that you don't have to update. For example, here, if you first build this observer and then place the node block, something very bad might happen. So you don't want to use a design where you don't have too much hassle in the order of component placing. So I thought Euler's World Eater looks nice. I've never used it before. We'll see. And after choosing the World Eater design, you will have to choose the trencher design. Okay, so let's get to the next step in our parameter. And unfortunately, my location is as bad as it can be because I will have to remove a ton of water. And the reason for that is that I want to build a mega drowned farm. So I need a large river biome. And we have a server with a vault border, so we have kind of limited space. And this was the best location that I could find. And you see I have marked the corners of the perimeter to be here in Xero's map. And you see trenching will really be a nightmare because we have water on all sides and one corner is even in the ocean. But anyway, we have at least one side, and this is the first trench that we'll lay down, where we have the corners on dry land and not too much water, just a small river here. And for that there's a fantastic design in its limestone Discord, which is the smooth wall trencher by Desu. Because this trencher will create its own trenches, so you don't have to prepare anything. For many trencher designs, you will have to dig down an area behind the trencher. So you have to do something in advance. This trencher, you can just build it, and you can build it in literally 10 minutes. Of course, in creative, it's extra easy. And you can just start the trencher. You want to start it something like 90 blocks over the surface. And let's just tick sprint a bit. And you see that it will create a nice smooth trench. And all you have to do is to occasionally halt it if you encounter any water. Of course, you must remove any water or lava that you have here. And you will also have to check. Sometimes it misses one block here. So for example, that one here, you will have to remove that in order that the trencher doesn't get stuck, but that's not too bad. And of course, before building that in survival, I always use a creative world to do that. So I have created the trencher for the first trench. And now it will start running. And in single player, you can place a carpet bot in the middle to load the area. On the survival server, I use my second account to load it. And then you can run this trencher for a bit. This is also a double speed trencher, so it will be lowered by 1 block on both sides. And after a while, the shape of the trench becomes apparent. And then in survival, of course, you must start the task of clearing all of these liquids. And the rivers aren't too bad. The main problem are the water-filled caves below. I think it took me maybe 6 hours of work time to create this trench in survival because of all of the water I had to remove. And this is the trench that I created. You see the side walls are really nicely smooth down to bedrock. And this was smooth sailing. There's not a lot that can go wrong as long as you check in from time to time to see if there's any water. Now we'll get to the side trenches. And I already built the first trencher here. And for this I use a different technology. I have a ton of water in the path. So for this side trench I will use the 3-wide trencher by voiding, which is quite a sight to see. So you started by opening this fence gate. Of course you could also use something like Desu's trencher if you don't have too much water. But this trencher can trench through water and through lava as long as they don't mix and create cobble. The price that you pay is that you will have to dig a tunnel at the bottom. So this tunnel is 2 high and 3 wide. That's not too bad. Took me maybe 15 minutes to create it for this trench here. And the other issue is that you have to remove everything that is not movable by slime. So you will have to remove any chests, any spawners, any dispensers if you hit a trial chamber. But then this trencher just runs and runs and runs, and you don't have to do anything except AFK. And the way it works is that it grabs the blocks using these slime flying machines, brings them up, they will be destroyed by TNT, and as soon as the flying machine has reached the top, it will reverse course and go back down. And once it reaches the bottom, the whole trencher will move one block forward. There's a maximum height, so just around here is the highest that the territory can be, which is something like 120 blocks. So this trencher is not feasible in the mountains, but there you would probably go with a normal side trencher anyway. So how can you check that trenching is safe, that you didn't miss any of the immovable blocks that you have to remove? They're very simple. We use the Litematica copy of the world that I described earlier in the video, and I have made this as long as the trench will be. And I just start the trencher and tick warp all the way to the other side. And if the trencher gets stuck, I will check what went wrong. So let's do that and check in an hour later. And you see that the trencher goes right through water and lava as long as they don't mix. So this was actually a very close call here. We even got a bit of cobble, but this was behind the trencher, so we were very lucky. And what you need to do is just to wall off the lava. It's probably a good idea to do the lava first. Just close these holes. And then you close off the sides with the water, like so. So in the end you will have a 3 wide trench that is free of liquids. And you can do this of course while the trench is running. But otherwise this is a true beauty. If you have ever cleared water, this thing will just go and go and go. Of course the building time for this trencher is much higher, but you will save that time on the front of water clearing. So my trencher made it almost to the end of the path, but you see it did get stuck. And what you can also see is that we hit a trial chamber. And indeed there was a spawner in the way, or a vault actually. So this vault is in the path of the trencher, and we will have to remove this vault before we run it. Otherwise the path is clear. Now everything is prepared to run the trencher. Our second account stands here. But while this trencher is running, we can do two things. First, we can already create walls in front of the trencher. So this is the middle. These will be the 3 blocks the trencher creates. So we can wall off the water here if we like, at least the easy accessible. And then I'll just create the walls like that. Of course, the second thing we can do while this trencher is running is construct the other trencher. But for that, I have already aligned the world eater in there. So I have scaled it up to the correct size. So this is where the world eater will be, obviously a bit higher. So now we know exactly where the other trencher needs to be. And this Euler world eater just needs a 1 wide trench. I will create a 3 wide anyway. So this is where we need the other trencher. And while the first trencher is running, I will construct the second side trencher. Okay, so the side trenches are in. I built the same trencher and ran it on the other side. So you see we have a very nice 3 wide trench, and I must say it was really relaxing because unlike the Desu trencher, you just have to check in maybe every few hours and then fill in the gaps that were water. So wherever you see this cobbled deep slate here, there were water holes, and the same on the other side. I already removed the trenchers. Now it's time to lay down the final trench. And if you do a normal world eater, that is the corners are land, then you would probably go with one of these trenchers again. But since I have so much water, you can see it on the map. So these are the corners, tons of water. I will once again go with the same mechanics, but at this time do a 12 wide trench. And I will try to go with the 12 wide trencher by Kronos this time, which basically uses the same technology. But there's something we need to do first, and that is our 3 wide hole is not large enough to build a trencher in. We need to extend this hole at one side, and I will do just that with a little setup that you can do whenever there's not too much water around. So here's what you do if you want to drill down a hole. I have set up a dispenser and a crafter that crafts TNT minecarts and another crafter that crafts the minecarts. And if we strongly power the middle one, then it will first craft the TNT minecart and then it will power both this crafter, which replaces the minecart, and it will power the dispenser. So if we just give this a pulse like that, you see that we let drop down 3 minecarts. And unlike TNT, minecarts will explode only when they hit the bottom. So TNT will always explode something like 80 blocks below the dispenser or below the TNT duper. But this one will go down all the way to bedrock. So let's just put this on a clock and stop the clock if we see water. But that's looking pretty good actually. And that hole should be wide enough to build the trenchers in. All the way down to bedrock. There we go. So let's fire up Litematica and construct our trenchers. The last trencher is constructed and we are prepared to run it. Preparation took a bit longer because we have a trial chamber here. And again, for these types of trenchers, you need to remove all of the immovable blocks. That means all the barrels, all the hoppers, all the dispensers, and of course the vaults and the spawners. And the biggest problem is that there is red glazed terracotta hidden in these trial chambers. And even though red glazed terracotta is movable, it can't be grabbed by slime and transported upwards. So you will also have to find and eliminate all of the red glazed terracotta in the trial chambers. But I think we're good to go now. I haven't simulated everything in creative yet, but the start, the first 100 blocks or so. So let's turn on this trencher. So again, the build complexity of this trenchers is of course much higher. And it took maybe 3 to 4 hours to construct this. But once you have done it, you don't have to babysit it like the other trencher. But if this is your first parameter, if this is your first large slimestone project, then I suggest you go with a simpler trencher like Desus. The trencher is almost done. So now it's time to fit in the World Eater. And for that, we once again do a Litematica copy into a creative world. In the creative copy, your first step is to align the World Eater correctly. Make sure the side trenches are where they are, and many World Eater schematics have these outlines where the trenches need to be. So you know that they are correct. If necessary, align the other side so that the return side is smack down in the trench as well. And then you need to adjust the height. If you want to be on the safe side, then these water sweepers have to go over the highest block, which in this case is something like y equals 80. So let's bring up the schematic to the desired height. And then, because it's a creative copy, just paste it in using Litematica. And then try to run it. Make sure you have an AFK player in the middle, otherwise you will only partially load the area. And then let's roll. Let's do a tick sprint. And then you just let it run for a while and see if everything works as expected. And now what is expected is that you will at some point meet obsidian where the sweepers get stuck. What's also expected that if you do a tick sprint, sometimes the visuals are not updated. Don't worry too much about that. So let's run this for a while and see what happens. And if your world eater stops in your simulation, then the only reason should be that one of the sweepers got stuck. And the only reason for that should be that the sweeper hit an immovable block like obsidian, or maybe a trial chamber spawner or vault. So what you'll have to do is to remove the obsidian and start the sweeper again. Now we need to go this way because the obsidian was on this side. So in this case you need to update this piston, and the easiest way is to put a button on it because this will be broken immediately. So this restarts the flying machine. And now the flying machine will go all the way to the other side. And once it reaches there, it will restart the world eater, because the world eater has a security mechanism that it will restart the next cycle only if all of the sweepers have returned. A singular obsidian block is rather easy to remove. On the other hand, if you have a lava lake like that, it might convert into a large obsidian patch, because in this case we have ocean on top. So sometimes it's easier to just write down the coordinates of these lava patches and fill them in using gravel or disposable blocks so that you don't get the obsidian in the first place. And then you just run the world eater in your creative copy as long as you like until you're convinced that everything works. And then you're ready to construct the world eater on your survival world. And there we are. The world eater is constructed. And the easiest way to do that is using a mob switch, of course, because you certainly don't want a creeper to go into your flying machines. But since we usually don't run a mob switch, I replaced a lot of transparent blocks with lighting sources. So I replaced the glass blocks with sea lanterns, which are transparent lighting blocks. So this way nothing will spawn on your world eater, but it does carry a performance penalty because light updates cost performance. So this version is just slightly laggier than a version without light sources. Let's do another copy in our creative world as a final test before we start the world eater. The bot is placed in the middle, and for this world eater to start it, you hit the node block, and if you want to stop it once the flying machines return, you have to wait until nothing moves anymore. So because this world eater will be lowered 2 blocks. There we go. Now you can hit the node block again, and now this world eater will stop once the flying machines return. And you have a similar notebook on the other side. You can stop it on both sides if you want. Of course, we are interested to see if everything works, so let's just let it running and maybe simulate a few minutes or a few days if you're paranoid like I am. And now we're ready to start the world eater in survival. Our alt account is loaded, so let's roll. And now, if we did everything right, all we have to do is check in maybe every couple of hours, see if our sweepers hit obsidian, remove the obsidian and restart the sweepers, but that's it. And of course, once we reach deep slate level, we might stop the world eater from time to time and check for diamonds. And that's the final pass of the world eater. We have reached Bedrock, and I plan to break a lot of Bedrock anyway, so I won't bother to go down any further. I already disconnected the sweepers. I also removed the upper part of the main site here. So hopefully these flying machines will crash into the wall and get rid of the lower part so that we don't have to remove it manually. Alright, that's looking good. Now, in case you're wondering, I got a full shulker box of diamond ore and a bit of change. So that's not too bad. And otherwise our perimeter is ready for the mega drone farm that we plan to build. Now, a bit of advice on how to build these flying machines. The survival friendly ones you can build from the bottom up. So you can just build this layer, then the next layer. And you always must be careful to place at least the observers and the redstone blocks in the right order. So in this case, if you first place the slime block and then place the observer, nothing happens. But if you first place the observer and then the slime block, this observer will set a pulse. So in this case, we are lucky. Only these pistons fire. But there are cases where this is absolutely unwanted. So you want to make sure that you always place the observer in the right order. And this can be, in fact, something like that you just have to place the blocks in front of the observers first, and then you can place the observers. Sometimes you have these observer chains. In this case, just find the first observer, place it first, and then place the remaining ones. The other thing which might be a bit iffy are quasi-powered pistons. So for example, this piston here is quasi-powered. But if you place the piston first and then you place the redstone block, nothing happens because the piston needs a block update. So what you can do in this case is just use a temporary block, place it on the side of the piston, and then the piston will extend. And these are the main rules. If you follow them, hopefully your Slimestone project will go smoothly. And that's the end of the video. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you now have a good idea how to build a world eater. Thanks for watching. Leave a like if you want to see more content like this. Please subscribe so that you don't miss any of my videos. And see you next time. Bye bye.